what does your Thanksgiving look like, Professor?
I don't know.
Not
Honestly,
the same every year?
we've been waiting to. So my partner's sister sometimes comes, and she has
Wait, is this Crazy Kim?
no. Oh my gosh, I have not seen crazy. Goodness, she has two sisters, Kim and Carrie. Crazy Kim, we have not seen in 10 years, and well, yeah, 10 years since she randomly showed up at a baby shower for our twins, like without being invited, but that was exciting. And then, so this is her other sister who lives in Arizona. But if she comes, Arizona. So if they come, well, either way, we're just eating and watching football at our house. So nothing exciting, but I'm ready. I'm ready to eat. I've been stretching, you know. Yeah, I mean, food and my my daughter Paisley is just already, but she has like a menu planned out for Thanksgiving. She's like, I just want to make sure that this and this and this will be
Oh,
there.
she's not cooking it.
No.
Oh.
She has like a menu of requests for what she wants people to make.
Right, okay, got it.
I want Aunt Barbara to make her rolls, and I want Mom to make this, and I want me to make like this artichoke dip that like I make. She's like, as everybody's food that she would like delivered to her on that day. And I'm like, I respect you for that. I understand. I have mine in my head. I didn't write it down, but it's in my head. You know?
He appreciates when other people appreciate something that you make.
Yeah, that's
Right?
nice, right?
I make kick-ass cranberry sauce, so everybody's like, oh God, please bring me cranberry.
Right? It's fun when people like what you make. So last night I made spaghetti for my kids and they told me it tasted like dirty sink water. I was like, thank you. You guys are so kind. Right? I was like, it tastes fine to me, but all right, whatever. So yeah, it's nice when people appreciate what you what you make. I think they were
Your
just in a
efforts,
mood, right?
right?
They don't like spaghetti, but I was just trying to be helpful.
Almost like
Is anyone going
vanilla
anywhere
thing
next
that
week
everybody's-
at all? Not that they gave you a break to go anywhere, right? Like I'm irritated that the college didn't give us the week off. They did it once, and I feel like they should do it again, right? I think they're afraid you won't come back because there's so little afterward. They could be like, oh, freedom, and then that'll be it.
I do like the long Christmas or
Yeah.
that holiday so you can actually
Yeah.
go.
Go
If you want to go overseas or whatever, it's not a.
They're talking about about doing, and it might not matter anymore. A lot of you might not at that point, but they're talking about doing a compressed calendar where they actually have a winter session because we don't have one right now.
I love truncated,
Yeah,
right?
I kind of like it because
Just get at it and get it done.
Yeah, then you could take a 4-week class over winter and knock it off your list, which is very
Right.
nice. So we'll see that might be in like a year or two. They're
That's
they're
helpful
pushing
for
really hard for it.
kids that are transferring, or yes, anybody that's transferring,
Yeah,
because sometimes they're like, oh yeah, you have to have that OCAM before we'll let you in, or
Right.
whatever.
right. And so then you could take it over that 4-week break, and then like I would teach a class online over that break, and it'd be nice. And it's just like extra like income to do it that way, and extra like class off your list. So we'll see it. I think that's coming down the line. They're voting on it. I think they should add Thanksgiving break to the vote though. Right? That's my campaign that I'm pushing for. Right. So we have more time for food. I won't see you next week. So I know that you don't have all your classes off, but we won't have class Monday and Wednesday, which has been on the syllabus and reminding you. I posted it this morning and it'll pop up for you, I think, later today. But there's a homework assignment for chapter 11. It's really brief. It should hopefully take you maybe 15 to 20 minutes to do. But since we don't have class Monday and Wednesday, I had to give you an assignment. So it is short, that will allow us to not cover chapter 11, which I don't normally cover anyway. It's disorders of sex and gender, which aren't required to be covered in. I think it's really interesting. So it gives you a chance to kind of look it over briefly, but we won't be covering. So you're picking 2 disorders, you describe it, what are the causes and treatments. It's really brief. You'll be turning it in on Canvas on Monday. Your paper is tonight. Hopefully you're close. Very close, right? So you're smiling at me, right? Since you're done, you're smiling because you're happy to be done, right? Remember that you can turn this in late. Okay, so if you miss the deadline, you can turn it in. It's 10% each day. So try and get it as soon as possible. But if you miss it, you can email it to me tomorrow or the next day. If you completely miss it, you can still turn it in for half credit, okay, at any point before the class is over. Okay, so just to throw that out there, if like things are overwhelming and you miss it, better late than not at all, okay? Yeah.
In Google Docs, you can, before you download it to a PDF, you can, you can preview what it looks like in the PDF form. I noticed the first time I submitted my essay yesterday, it like changed something that was a certain way in
When you
Drive,
converted it?
and then when I converted it to PDF, it changed that. And so I unsubmitted it and resubmitted it, but
Okay.
I didn't realize that you could just preview it from PDF before you turn it.
Yeah, because one thing that sometimes happens, I see this a lot, is that when it changes the formatting ever so slightly, the references page gets messed up.
It literally changed,
Yeah.
like it made the first page start.
Right,
down.
right, and then it can mess up what like the general formatting of the paper, so not a bad idea to double check that, that's a good suggestion. Alright. That's all right, the coffee tried to kill you, right, as much as it helps us, sometimes it tries to kill us. Are there any other questions about the paper, about any of that? You're okay. Okay, one last thing just throw out there over break, there is a 20-point extra credit opportunity on Canvas that you can do at any point if you wanted to, right? So if you missed a participation or two throughout the semester, if you lost some points on an exam, if you're worried about the paper, whatever it is, it's worth 20 points. It just gets added to your score. It's related to, I wrote a book on self-care and mindfulness. So you'll read through that and do some self-care and mindfulness activities, which I think are kind of fun. Like self-care can be anything. My favorite self-care is eating a piece of cake, right? So, I mean, it can literally be anything, right? My therapist yesterday was like, you had a rough day, go home and self-care with cake. It's like, well, I would hate to not follow your advice, right? So went to the store, got a piece of cake. I followed my therapy advice to self-care yesterday. It was delicious chocolate with little like pumpkins on top. Perfect, right? And there's more self-care to be had tonight. I can't wait. So if you're interested, 20 points, okay? And so that would just add to your grade. And you have it all the way till the end of the semester, but if you're looking for something next week, that is something cool. Right? Just to put that out. All right, otherwise, we get to our nice light topic of disorders of aging today. Today's always a weird one in both of my classes. It's like disorders of aging and sexual assault. It's like my least favorite content day of the semester, but these are important, even if they're not like the most uplifting. So we talked about disorders of childhood. And so these are at the other end of the spectrum, disorders when you're older. And they kind of fall in this group that we call geropsychology. Okay, so the study of people over the age of 65. So 65 and older in our society is generally defined as like old age or being like a senior. And just like every other age range, it brings its own unique pressures and upsets and changes that come. And what we'll talk about really is just this second group. So what we sometimes reference here is that disorders in this cluster can be the ones that happen to anyone at any age, which are the ones we've been talking about all semester, right? Like when you're older, you can suffer from anxiety and depression, schizophrenia, or any of the things that we've covered all semester long. Or you can have disorders that are kind of unique to this age time, which are the disorders of cognition. So that's what we're going to focus more on, the disorders of cognition, things like Alzheimer's, Lewy body, and a few others. So again, like you can have these at any age, right? Like we talked about depression, we talked about anxiety, substance abuse, psychotic disorders. We've talked about these all semester. So oftentimes as we get older, and maybe you lose some of the abilities that you've had, or you have loss in your life, right? I had depression for the last 3 months because I couldn't walk, right? Like you have unique pressures and things that happen like when you get older, right? And that can cause you depression or anxiety, right? Like you've always had, or maybe it like develops later in life. Substance abuse can happen later in life too, kind of an interesting one. It tends to appear in one specific way a lot. And I put a little clue up here with the picture. The substances that people who are older tend to abuse are prescription medications. Okay, it's very, very common, and it can be intentional or unintentional or a little bit of both, right? My mother-in-law, sweetest person ever, right? But I feel like she has this thought of like, well, I'm older and wiser than the doctor, so I know best. I'm like, do you have a medical degree? No, but I know best. Okay, but she has this cocktail, she calls it her cocktail, and it scares me, right? But her cocktail, whenever she's in pain, is like some crazy combination of multiple Advil, Tylenol, and Motrin mixed together. Like, I feel like if I took it, I would die, right? But I have a very low pain, like, tolerance for medication. But she takes this cocktail multiple times a week, and she thinks it's like what she should take. The doctor will be like, take one ibuprofen, and she takes like 3 with a Motrin and like 3 Advil, right? It's that like, I know better. That's one way that you can see this presents. It can also be that you forget that you took it, right? And that happens a lot too of like, I took did I take the medication? And then you end up taking it again and again. And then all of a sudden you have these reactions because you've taken it multiple times, which is why these pill boxes become more and more like prominently used the older that people get. It's like, oh, it's empty, so I know I took them, right? Or at least took them out of the container, even if I didn't take them. So that can be one way that it can manifest. Another is like kind of chasing prescriptions, right? Where people will go from doctor to doctor to doctor trying to get different like medications, like pain medications, for example, or like seeking things from multiple doctors when they aren't necessarily connected, so they might not know that you have all these prescriptions. So the most commonly abused substances in this group are pain medications and prescribed medications as kind of a group. And then obviously psychotic disorders like schizophrenia typically start earlier in life, but they could start here too, right? It's not impossible if there's like an environmental trigger. Any like thoughts or comments, anything here before we get more into like the disorders of aging? All right. Yeah.
Is it more likely, like, is it the most likely, at least when you're older, to use substances because it's more likely that you can prescribe them and then you got addicted? Like, over time, like, it's more likely at some point you become.
It could be, or like you're just reliant on it, where like you feel like you need it in order to be okay, and maybe you don't actually need it, but you feel like dependent on it. I would say that's more common, right? That you have been taking it for a while, so you feel very dependent on it. It looks like it's a safety blanket for you. So that might be one way that could appear. So with disorders of cognition, right? And I guess I should preface this by saying the reason it's one of my least favorite topics is my dad passed from Alzheimer's and Lewy body, like, well, at this point it's been like six or 7 years ago, right? But with these, we're looking at like small mishaps in memory being something that are common, but it can escalate to something much more. Okay, so as we age, our memory tends to decline. Really well documented, right? Now you can delay this a lot if you're mentally active, if you stay sharp, if you exercise, take care of yourself, do all the right things, you can keep your memory sharp for a very, very long time. Now, and your memory can be poor when you're younger too, right? Like when you are sleep deprived, when you're stressed, when you're not eating well, right? Like memory can be affected by a lot of different things. But what happens with these disorders of cognition is that people go beyond like a typical change in memory to something much more extensive. And they start developing what are called neurocognitive disorders that used to be called dementias. They changed the name in the last DSM, and so now it's neurocognitive disorders. They're very commonly confused with something called a delirium. And delirium is something that is very quickly developing. It's usually like a short-term condition from an infection, from an injury of some kind, where you have a hard time like focusing, you can't like follow a train of thought. It tends to be something that comes on very quickly and goes away very quickly. The neurocognitive disorders start very slowly, and they tend to develop slowly and gradually over time, getting worse and worse and worse.
Like ADHD is considered a neurocognitive disorder, isn't it? And it's something that's
Not one of these. So it's like a developmental disorder. Like it's within, so neurocognitive is the technical name now for like the dementias. So it includes like 5 or 6 of these different ones that we'll get to.
that I use that in my paper with diagnosis. Anyhow, so it's not, it's
No.
something that develops, not something that was
Right. It's tricky. So neurocognitive is like a very broad term, right? Like if you break it down, you're looking at something like neurological and that affects your thinking, right? And so it's a very broad term, but it's a term that's used to define these. So I'm not sure that while it might describe ADHD, it wouldn't be the proper category for it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It's like, check my paper.
Oh, you're welcome. I found a little video. It's not exciting at all. I just, you like how I set the tone, like the expectation's really low. It's like 2 minutes long, but I felt like it was a really good distinction between these two things. I found it to be kind of helpful. They had like a little mnemonic. And I learned something new in watching it, which I always think is fun. A perpetual student. So, I'm a big fan of scary movies, right? And so, I love the case of delirium when they're in a hospital or like dealing with a condition. What we're more interested in are the neurocognitive disorders, which develop slowly over time. And there are several of them. We're really going to focus on just like one or two of them that are more prominent. But of these neurocognitive disorders, the most common by a mile is Alzheimer's. How many of you have known someone who has struggled with or is struggling with Alzheimer's at some point in your life? A lot of you. It's very, very common. Unfortunately, it's like 1 in 10 people, like 10% of people, and your odds of it only get higher as you get older. Right? So this tends to be a disorder that affects people over the age of 65. Now, it can affect people younger than them. Okay, there's something called early onset Alzheimer's, where it happens to people in their 50s. It's relatively rare, but it can happen. It's thought to be somewhat more genetic. But it's typically after the age of 65. And with every like 5 to 10 year increment beyond 65, your chances like double. Okay, so it is something that unfortunately a lot of people do struggle with at some point in their life. It takes about 8 to 10 years to work its course, and it is fatal, right? So as it stands right now, it just slowly gets worse until it kills you. And what happens is the way that you die from it is that your brain literally shuts down and forgets how to function. You literally forget how to breathe at the end or fight off an illness at the end. Your brain can't do it anymore. It doesn't function properly to do it. And so ultimately, it's like some small disease that will often claim your life at the very end. Yeah.
So I would assume like it attacks your like hippocampus area, because it's memory.
Oh, so it's a good guess, right? Like it's actually these little crazy things called senile plaques and neurofibrillary tangles. They slowly cluster up and form problems where the neurons don't fire properly. And then it does spread progressively through the different parts of the brain. All right, so the hippocampus is in charge of a lot of like short-term memory stuff, right? Like the stuff that happens quickly, like 30 seconds or less, way less oftentimes. But it actually is more like in the way that they communicate, right? That they're not firing and working properly as you progress through the disorder. So with this, it tends to start with like little things, okay, where you have like little slips of the tongue. You can't remember the name of somebody. You can't remember like where you were going, what you were doing. And then it gets worse and worse and worse over time. Again, like 8 to 10 years on average. It's kind of a long estimate. Oftentimes you see like 7 or 8 years being pretty like typical as well. But toward the end, people forget names. They often kind of go back in time. It's almost like their mind progressively goes back. I know my dad for a long time at the end, he kept calling me like I became his sister in his head. Like it was like he forgot that he had kids and a wife, and he just kept going back and back and back. Right. And the wild thing with this disorder is people have moments of lucidity. So they'll be fine one moment and then they're not the next. And it's thought to be something about these plaques and tangles and the way that they cluster in the brain, where somebody will have a moment where they remember everything and they're clear and they're sharp. And then the next minute it's, who are you? Right. Very challenging to interact with and deal with. My dad used to joke at the end, he's all like, I can read books again for the first time. Like he had a good sense of humor. I got my sense of humor from him. He's like, I just keep reading the same book and it's new every time. It's great. He's like, it's a good book, so I'll keep reading it. But like, it's just like you remember and then you don't, and then you remember and then you don't. And that's what makes it so challenging. Yeah.
We're trying to.
Yeah. So they were talking about like a type 3 diabetes, right? And there is some really solid stuff there. that it relates to like blood sugar and insulin levels.
Yeah.
And so that's still something that's very much being researched, as like almost like a type 3, where there was some thought that like your sugar levels and like the diabetic like tendencies would correlate to this, and that could be one area for treatment as well.
I also saw a study on microplastics. They
Mhm.
linked to this too, like just weird stuff.
Yeah. Diet is a big one, environmental like toxins and things is another one. This is a really big area of study because it affects so many people, right? And we have lots of drugs that have shown promise, but we don't have a cure. We've shown a lot of like really interesting like connections, but then it's hard to like narrow it all down and get just the right one. But we are,
So individual.
yeah, but we're on it, right? I mean, it's definitely one of the more researched things. And what we're trying to really figure out are these tangles and plaques. So everyone has neurofibrillary tangles and senile plaques. They're these beta amyloid proteins that form in the spaces between like our neurons. But what happens is for some reason, people with Alzheimer's have more of these plaques than the average person. And they start to build up over time, the plaques cluster to form what are called tangles. And these tangles make it where the neurons don't communicate properly with each other. The regions of the brain kind of slowly like die off because they can't communicate properly. And that's thought to be a big culprit of what's going on with this illness. And so a lot of the treatments that we're focusing on are like, how do we break up these plaques and tangles or keep them from clustering in the way that they are? I have a little like video that kind of highlights the progression of this. I'll play it for you really quickly. I'm just kind of describing it. Brain kind of progressing a little bit as it goes. So the big causes, as I said, are these tangles and plaques, but there is some like genetic evidence a little bit, not a ton, but especially when it occurs early. And people who have early onset, it tends to be somewhat more genetic. But after 65, it's just a disorder of aging, right? And again, by the time you hit your 90s, you're much more likely to have it. And by the way, Alois Alzheimer was a German psychiatrist who identified the first case. So just as that point of clarification. So a lot of causes related to these, and then some thoughts, like we said, with different environmental things. Diet has been another really big one. Lack of sleep is a really big contributing factor. So when we talk about treatments, there are medications that people can take, but it's a lot of lifestyle stuff. And if you take good care of yourself when you get older, you can delay this, like I said, for a very long time. You can very much slow it down with a lot of the like behavioral things that you might do. Similar, so Alzheimer's is number one, like the most common. The second most common is one called Lewy body dementia, right? And Lewy body dementia is where we have these proteins called Lewy bodies after the person who discovered them. Oftentimes that's what we see there. These little like clusters in the brain that he called Lewy bodies that build up and they affect your learning, your thinking, your movement, your memory. This one presents a little bit differently than Alzheimer's. What you tend to see with Lewy body, you see more hallucinations, which isn't super common with Alzheimer's. People with Alzheimer's are confused and they might not know what reality is around them, but they don't tend to see things that aren't there. Sometimes with Lewy body dementia, people will full on hallucinate, almost like they're having a psychotic episode. And so seeing things that aren't there is kind of a big one with this. It also leads to movement issues where people have like tremors and they have a really hard time like walking. It affects your voluntary movement a little bit more. So very similar presentation, but it's a little bit more like with causing those hallucinations, a little bit more movement related. And then the other ones on here are other ones that we see, right, that are common as well. Vascular neurocognitive disorders were something related to blood flow. Sometimes people, when they have like a stroke or like a cerebrovascular injury or accident, it can restrict blood flow and cause problems. If it's something that could be repaired, it might go away. Like if someone had a like brain trauma and of some kind that we could surgically like fix to some degree, like maybe there was like an area that was restricted and we can open it up. That might alleviate itself, but it's another common one. The next two are really rare. Pick's disease and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Creutzfeldt-Jakob is the human equivalent of mad cow disease, right? Very, very rare. It tends to happen in like little isolated pockets of underdeveloped like areas. But it's from eating or consuming like meat that has a virus within it. Really rare. So those two are very, very rare. And these two are a little bit more different, right? They're a little different in the way that they're more common, but they're different in the way they present. Huntington's and Parkinson's. Huntington's is very genetic. Like you like have a very high propensity. You can actually test to see if you're going to get it or not. We are developing tests for Alzheimer's as well, but they're not super accurate yet. So they're not very popular. But Huntington's disease and Parkinson's a little more like rigidity and tremors and unsteadiness. We have a couple of like kind of prominent people who have struggled with that. But these are all neurocognitive disorders that people can develop typically after the age of 65. With by a mile, Alzheimer's, then Lewy body being the most common. Yeah. Bless you.
They just like the Huntington's disease.
There was a big breakthrough with like some of the, so we've identified like a genetic marker, right? And so oftentimes when you have a parent who has this, I want to say it's a 50% or more, it's in the 50s, your likelihood of developing. Right, and so there is a test that you can take that will tell you whether or not you're likely to develop it. But then you get false positives all the time, and how awful to be like, I'm gonna get it, and then you don't. But there was a breakthrough in like some of the. I just read this. It was like last year or something like that. It was 6 months ago.
I saw that super recent, and I just kind of was like scanning off.
Yeah.
But it was I think in not. Something it was like the genetic markers.
Right, it had to do with the genetic markers, right? Because it was something like we've known it has a genetic tendency, but it was showing the like gene expression, if I remember correctly, it's like the genetic expression of where to look to screen for it. It was something related to that.
And how it was like it was unbundled or something. It was like broken almost. And I don't know, it was very interesting in the everybody was like,
Right, and we're constantly making those discoveries, which is amazing because the more that we know, the hopefully better we can get at treating these things. I mean, these two have like Parkinson's, there are medications you can take to reduce the tremors, and to like really drastically cut them down. But they have such horrible side effects that they're very hard to tolerate. And there are medications for like Lewy body and Alzheimer's as well, but they only work to a certain degree. They work in the early stages, and then you hit a point where they don't work anymore. And at that point, you just kind of have to live with it. Induced, sure.
When it comes to Alzheimer's, the concept so rare when it is diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
But is there is Alzheimer's or Alzheimer's just as likely to be substance abuse?
No, so it's not thought to have, so your diet and like habits play a role in it, but it's not thought necessarily that they're going to be the trigger that causes it. And because it's so slow acting, what you would more likely see something like vascular neurocognitive disorder would be more substance induced, where there's a trigger. So like vascular neurocognitive disorder, vascular dementia, it used to be called, would have more of a trigger from like a substance because it's going to develop a little quicker. Yeah, like so abusing substances in your life might make you more prone to like brain changes over time, but not necessarily more vulnerable to like Alzheimer's. So like it could be one of many triggers, but it's not going to happen like as a quick onset, like maybe vascular might.
Is there has that ever been a symptom of any other besides the vascular?
I mean, it could be like, and when you get to the later phases, like not being able to recognize faces or objects, right, like is not uncommon, right, totally. And as your brain progressively gets like more and more deterioration happening, Like you would see more and more of that like later on. So I mean, but like all of those little nuances are going to be things that are going to be like evaluated. Like, was there a substance that someone was using? Did they have something like a cerebrovascular event like a stroke? Right? Because like with strokes, people do get things like aphasia, or like they might have everything happen very rapidly and then it backs way off as they recover a little bit from it. So strokes and like vascular incidents present very differently oftentimes, right? They're clustered here, but they can present very different. Yeah.
Obviously, since it's a marathon, sort of we already talked about it. The onset is slow and it lasts longer, but with the memory and the thinking and the movement and the hallucinations with the Lewy body, is that ever confused with the Lewy?
It could be, but it would be typically it's very like gradual, right? So, and the hallucinations don't tend to come forward until like later, like when you've gotten a little farther with it. It's actually my dad actually had Lewy body instead of Alzheimer's, and he had like moments where he'd like see little things, but toward the end he would like hallucinate full people. Like he would believe other people were in the room when they weren't there. And so it tends to, because it's so global as a symptom of that, it could be, I think if someone maybe didn't know the full case, it could be confused shortly, but it would probably be seen that it's a much bigger thing. I would assume typically, like it could in the short run be confused for sure. As far as treatment goes, right, we're working on it a lot. As we've been talking, there's a lot of research on this, a lot of really promising research. Treatments are like moderately helpful in the beginning. So in the early stages of having one of these, typically what you can do is you can give somebody a medication that really works on acetylcholine, or ACH. Acetylcholine is a big culprit with these, so is dopamine. But acetylcholine, when you break it down, or it prevents the breakdown of it, so because it tends to be in low supply. So we're kind of increasing the acetylcholine a little bit in order to reduce some of the symptoms. Now, these work well in the beginning, but then at some point they stop working and you just have to go off of that. And we're doing a lot of interesting research right now with like stem cells. So stem cell research was something that was prohibited for a long time. Until 2009, stem cell research was banned. Okay, Obama lifted the ban on it back in 2009. And so stem cells are special cells that have the ability to like divide for infinite periods of time, and they can give rise to more like specialized cells. So what we're trying to do with stem cell research is see if we can't re-stimulate some of the like growth of these neurons that have died. Right. And so there's a lot of research being done with this, along with like different diet and like lifestyle kind of things that we're looking at. But treatment for these, they help in the beginning. And then it's after that, it's kind of just more managing the symptoms than anything else. But a lot of promise. We'll see. Hopefully by the time like most of us are at that point, we have a much better idea of like how to treat this. In terms of delaying or preventing, as I said, there's a lot you can do. Right. And these are the things we know we're supposed to do anyway, right? Which are easy to ignore, especially when we're stressed and we're busy and everything. Very easy to ignore exercise and diet and sleep. I always feel like this is like, yeah, I know slide, right? But as we get older, these become more and more important. Okay. As we are older and like at higher risk for these things, exercising increases blood flow, right? And so it helps to like keep everything in your body moving, right? Including like oxygen within your bloodstream. Your diet is really showing to play a big role. Like you were talking about that type 3 diabetes almost. We're seeing a lot of diet related stuff. Okay, so like omega-3 fats and eating smaller meals, avoiding high amounts of sugar. Sugar has been shown to play a bad role. So aluminum beverages in cans have also had like a negative correlation that we're seeing as well. Trying to eat across the rainbow, right? So like diet things are showing a really big part in this. Staying mentally active, okay? And I have like, my grandparents are long gone, but my partner's grandparents lived, oh my gosh, her grandma and grandpa lived to, one was 102 and one was 99. right? And the 99-year-old, she was sharp until she hit 97, like so sharp, right? And then I know people who are like in their 50s and 60s who are so slow, right? Like there's just such a range with this when you get older. But she was like always on it, just like very, very sharp. And you can do a lot of things like, like puzzles and strategy games. I'm going to say escape rooms could count, right? Like I'm going to count them because it makes me feel better, right? It's puzzles, right? But kind of little things to keep yourself active, reading, talking to other people, taking a class, following the road less traveled. This is one that I think we're all so guilty of. Like we sit in the same seats every day. You probably walk to your classes the same way every day. You drive the same route every day, right? Break it up every now and then. Like randomly turn right when you normally would have turned left. Like form those new pathways in your brain. It pushes your brain a little bit outside of its routine and it forms new neural connections. Right. So I challenge you, walk to your next class a different way today. Right? Like just a different direction. It doesn't have to be like way out of the way, but go a different way. You don't have to sit in a different seat that probably upset someone else, right? But just do something a little bit different. Those things change up the wiring and like the pathways in your brain, and they keep us mentally active in new ways. Sleep, really big one, right? Getting good sleep, managing your stress, being socially active. All of these things have a very like insulating, protective kind of like presence when it comes to these disorders, right? They can play a big role in helping you to stay safe for longer. Any like thoughts or questions or stories or comments or anything else here? Yeah. Oh, it's like the who, what, when, where, why, like those things, right? So like thinking through things. But we're so like such creatures of habit. And I think that's one thing that like we can do a little bit differently. Like I always go the same way because it's efficient, right? I know the fastest way to my office. Why would I go a slow way, right? But go a different route, right? Just something small every day. If you can do that, it forms like new pathways in your brain.
So there's a bunch of studies that it's really when you combine the mental stimulation with physical.
Yeah.
That is the sweet spot.
Yeah.
So things like dancing, things like hiking on uneven terrain versus, running 3 miles on the same,
right,
or not the same, but running on a flat surface.
Right.
It's that your physical has to adjust the same time that your brain adjusts. And that combo is what's really, I guess, making a difference.
That's why I read while I eat my cake.
There you go.
Right? Like I'm mentally active while I'm, yeah. Like you gave me permission, right? Like while I'm eating that cake, I do something mentally active, right? And I'm forging a new pathway. But yeah, no, you're right. Like it's the combination of multiple systems, right? You're engaging your brain while also engaging your body. And the combination of that is thought to be very like neuroprotective in some way. Talking while you're on a walk, right? Like it's both systems kind of like going together. Yeah. So there's
I'm a horseback rider.
Yeah.
And they linked, for whatever reason, like the horses walk and try to helping with like cognitive disabilities and, just how we do ride. Linking it like with Down syndrome, it really helps to stimulate, them.
So it's not consistent, right? Because you can't, even if you're camping or whatever you're doing, right? It's
Yeah.
not always the same.
Yeah. So it's been linked to some
Yeah.
really cool studies.
Yeah. It's very neuroprotective, like is this one of the ways that we're thinking about it, how it just activates things in a different way, which can really help us, right? So yeah, when you can engage multiple systems, when you can like do all of that, it tends to be really good for you. Yeah. Sure.
Like, if I'm studying for hours, as soon as I see the first question, it's not like the information doesn't even. So something that I found that really helps me and really kind of like solidifies the forms pathways that I'm studying is often before my classes. So I'll record like lectures on certain days. I'll connect my headphones and in the middle of when I'm running or walking, hiking, so I'll just be listening to whatever I need to study. And sometimes it'll be the entire time that I'm out there, sometimes it'll just be small parts. That will just, you know, get immersed by the surroundings and then just back to, you know, studying whatever it was. But there's been studies that show that if you can divert your focus in terms of what you're doing physically and you're receiving something else mentally or auditorily from the different senses, that will actually your brain will hold on to those a lot more than
Yeah.
if you were to just force yourself to focus when you don't have the mental focus to actually.
And when you were and that's great, right? And when you were talking about that, it was reminding me of, I think I was gone, but it was in the lecture I created, of EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. If you've heard of EMDR, it's working on bilateral brain stimulation in relation to also thinking about something like emotional, right? So we're piggybacking off of like both systems together of thinking of something emotional while you're also including like some stimulation. And it's thought for that reason why it helps you work through trauma faster because you're using both systems. So like some like really basic tenets of that are tapping. So like if you have like something really good that happens, they encourage you to like cross your arms and tap like a little bit on either side, almost like you're trying to tap it in. Like you're trying to seal that in there with like a bilateral tapping in a slow, like methodical way. Or like you hold buzzers when you're thinking about a traumatic event and something about like the buzzing with your eyes closed, it alternates both sides of the brain. It's like a physical plus mental, or following the light even. But that's one of the premises behind why EMDR works, is that it is using bilateral stimulation of the brain plus some kind of physical mechanical piece to activate the trauma and allow you to digest it and break it up in a different way. Right. So there's a lot of research to that, both as like, you know, how to help with these, plus like how to work through mood disorders, how to help with an exam, all that kind of stuff.
So there's kind of that urban myth there. I don't know what, I mean, creating new pathways. That's always like.
Sure.
We older people, like, oh, creating new pathways. Is there scientific validity to that? Like, oh, learn how to play the piano when you're 60, because then that's going to create all these new pathways.
Sure, it's much harder to do later in life, right? Like think how they always encourage us to learn languages and things when we're younger, because when you're young, you just pick it up so fast.
Right.
The older you get, the harder it is to do, because those pathways in your brain have narrowed so much, right, to what you're familiar with in a sense. And so creating new ones is very challenging to do. You can.
Is it
But
a real
it's hard.
thing? I mean, like.
Yeah, like I don't know that it's necessarily as dramatic as they make like new pathways. We're talking about like the most minuscule of like little dendritic growths, right? But those dendritic growths like are brain development and brain activity that help keep your mind sharp, right? So I don't know that it's as dramatic as they make it out to be, but there is some like truth to it in that way. Our brain does something called pruning, right? It eliminates everything we don't use, right? And so the more connections that you have, the less is pruned back. So that's kind of one of the ideas behind it, if that makes sense. Is he thinking about it?
Well, I didn't get the jump from the more you have, the less is pruned, because is it a percentage that gets?
Right,
pruned, or
yeah,
is it-
that I'm not sure we know, right?
So
I think it's just
that's
like
what I was
anything
processing.
unnecessary that you're not using, like it's almost like, it's like almost like everything is focused your attention on what you're doing, right? And so the more things that you have there, then the more like growth and area there is for like synaptic activity. Whether we call it growth or not, I don't know if that's more of a misnomer, but there's some truth to it, just maybe not quite in the way that we tend to think about it. Right, yeah, I think that's fair to say. Let this sink in. This is our last chapter. That just made me sad, right? But I love this chapter. It's very, very interesting. I just want to start it just a tiny bit today. So a heads up with this. I won't see you next week, but when we come back, I have a group activity that we're going to do with this that takes like a day and a half for us to do. So please try and be here for those last 2 classes so you don't miss out on it, if you can. We'll be looking at some famous cases of people who have tried to plead insanity. Really interesting folks, really scary folks. Speaking of insidious, right? There are some scary people in this, in terms of like the crimes that have been committed. So what I want to do is just kind of introduce this today, and then we'll jump into it more when I see you next. And we'll start a group activity that will take 2 classes to kind of get all the way through. So with this chapter, make it big here. We're looking at psychology and the law interacting with each other. Okay, the intersections between the law and psychology. Super complicated. I'm obviously not a lawyer. I know this much more from the psychology side than the logistical, like legal side. But there are kind of 2 elements to this. There's how psychology affects the law and how the law affects psychology. And both of them fall into the realm of forensic psychology, the intersections of psychology and the judicial system, whether that's working as like a profiler and trying to look for trends, right, in like different like criminal cases or like patterns within like certain like crimes that are being committed, or if it's working as like an expert in the legal system where you're like helping with like witnesses and trying to fight like insanity pleas and so on. There are a lot of really interesting like little niches within this. Anyone thinking of going into forensic psychology a little bit, right? Like maybe it's interesting, very, very interesting. And so there's 2 sides. We're going to spend a lot more time on the first side, but the second one will affect you quite a bit if you're ever practicing psychology. Like if you're a therapist, the law affects a lot of the things that you can do or cannot do, right, as a therapist. And that's what we'll focus on for that side. So when we talk about how the law affects psychology, there are a lot of different ways that this can pop up. I have a little video. Let me play it for you. And it talks about the term insanity.
Pleading insane during a trial.
Sorry, it started without me. It was ready. The term insanity is a really interesting one with a lot. And if you're like, oh, that seems really complicated, it's because it is, right? Like every state has a different rule. Apparently, New Hampshire's the state to get away with things in, right? Like, but every state has different like laws, different tests that they use to decide if you're sane or insane. And when you get convicted of these things, like can mean a different thing in every different situation. There have been a lot of cases of this over the years. We'll look at some big ones when I see you next time, but know that it is like a very like case by case thing. And I mentioned like the thing with insanity, just to read this to you as a side note. So the saying that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is widely attributed to Albert Einstein, though this attribution is incredibly incorrect. The phrase originated in the 1980s from the 12-step program Alcoholics Anonymous, where it was used to describe futile repetition of self-destructive behaviors. The quote has become a popular metaphor for the futility of repeating a failed approach over and over again, expecting different results. So like that whole, like it's doing the same thing and expecting a different result, not an accurate definition of insanity, complete like misattribution and misquoting of Einstein. And the idea that it's a mental illness, so like he had insanity, also completely false. So what we'll do next time is we'll jump into some of these verdicts. We'll look at some of these. We'll look at some people as well. A lot of people tried to have insanity as part of their case in some way. So we'll look at these folks and like some of those verdicts. And like I said, start an activity that will take us a little bit to get through. So last reminders for you on our concluding moments. Please don't forget that the paper is due by tonight. If you miss it, you can still email it. The late penalty. Don't forget that I won't see you next week. I hope you have happy eating, right? I wish you happy eating next week. But we won't have class. There will be a little homework assignment that will pop up, so don't forget about that. Have a wonderful little bit of time off, even if it's just this class. At least you get to sleep in a little bit, right? But I will see you December 1st. See you in December. That feels like a really long time, but it's not. But I'll see you in like a week. Have a wonderful time off. If you have any last little questions or anything, I'll be up here. Otherwise, I'll see you then. Oh, I forgot to pass around the sheet. It's right here. If you want to sign in really quickly before you go, I have a pen as well. Sorry about that. I had it right in front of me. I forgot. Okay. All right.